evening. My name is Hannah Clarke, and I support the right of women and girls. Men do not belong in female spaces. A woman cannot have a penis, and I'm not afraid to speak this truth. I'm here tonight to talk to you because of my involvement in the Man Friday movement. I think that many of you have heard of us, but for those who haven't, I'll start with a brief overview. I've called Man Friday a movement, but I think a better word might be a concept. We are a very loosely organised group of women who are horrified by the implications of self-identification and the resultant erasure of women. We're making a stand against this by self-identifying as men on Fridays. We show exactly how preposterous it is to be able to self-declare as the opposite sex by doing that. This all came about when Amy Desir took it upon herself to address the ludicrous guidance Swim England produced to engage trans people in swimming. This guidance, which was soundly rejected by the good ladies of Mumsnet, included such gems as telling us women who object to penises in their changing rooms require education, whilst our boobs must be covered at all times for fear of causing offence. Amy started a Mumsnet thread one Friday morning in February, telling us that she'd arranged a meeting at her local pool to discuss her inclusion in men-only swimming sessions as a self-identified man in accordance with the guidance. This thread inspired a whole lot of us, around 160 at the last count, to get behind the concept, and thus Man Friday was born. We started with a Facebook page where we plan our protests and share resources, and now have a website, a very active and funny Twitter account, thank you Rose, and a whole load of unconnected women joining in on Twitter every Friday using the hashtag Man Friday. I joined after seeing Amy's thread coincided with me wanting to be able to do something. I'd attended the Women's Place meeting in London in February, and I was in awe of all the women there. I was too shy to put my hand up and to talk. I didn't feel like I had anything to say, but I think I might make up for that now. At this point, I should probably confess that I'm very late to the feminism party. Partly due to having been a teenager in the 90s when we all embraced ladette culture and insisted that we were equal to men by behaving like the very worst of them. And I thought we didn't need it. I didn't notice when my life was damaged by the setup of our patriarchal society. Now, I should have noticed when my male juniors were given more respect than I was when I was managing client meetings, or I should have noticed when my career faltered in my late 20s and early 30s in spite of me being and remaining childless. I really should have noticed when my doctors refused to take my gynae problems seriously until my husband said he was on board with the treatment I wanted. Medicine 2017. What it did take for me to notice was developing anorexia in my mid-30s. And it wasn't so much the developing of it, but the recovery from it. I can't see anorexia as anything other than as a result of growing up steeped in patriarchal oppression. A lot is said about it being want to attain the beauty standards set out for us, which would be enough to label it as a result of the misogyny present throughout society. But for me, it wasn't that. I was physically enacting the requirement of women to not take up space, to be unobtrusive, to not exist as an independent being, and to pipe down. A wonderful therapist helped me work through how this environment had caused my illness and lit the spark that became a flame of feminism that now drives me. Anyway, I'm going to get back to Man Friday and stop talking about me. Amy's meeting ended with her being told that they'd take time to consider her needs and would revert to her within the fortnight, though they did eventually take a little over 3 weeks. In the meantime, the rest of us started writing to our local pools. Men-only swimming sessions are fairly few and far between, even in London, but I did find one near me in Dulwich, and I sent an email asking them their policy. And they responded that I, as a female-bodied, self-identified man, would be welcome to swim at their pool during the men-only session, and that I should change in the facilities that I felt necessary for myself. Having got the green light, I shared my plan with the Man Friday group, and what happened next was really all a bit unexpected, to be honest. Amy said she was able to come, which was great, as I didn't really fancy doing it on my own. And some journalists contacted us through Twitter as they wanted to cover what we were doing. Now, you can read most of what happened next in the Sunday papers from the 18th of March, and I'll be happy to talk about it over a drink later. But some points I really want noted for the record are, we did swim separately. Amy was a lot later than I was, so we didn't have strength in numbers, and I can tell you I was terrified. Yeah. But yeah, I went in by myself, as did Amy. rash vest. As comfortable as I am with Amy swimming topless, I didn't want to, and I do hope it's pretty clear that I'm a woman and that I shouldn't have been in that session. And this is actually the important point. I feel really bad for putting the staff in the leisure centre in the firing line. Service workers who are on the front line, and they're often on minimum wage, are being put on the spot with difficult decisions due to the ill-considered edicts from on high. It's not on. And I did go back the following week with some chocolates and a letter to thank them for their professionalism and appreciating that we'd drawn them into the melee, but I was really not sorry for what we'd done. Swim England have removed the guidance. They removed it the following week and have stated that they're opening it up for consultation. I've registered to be included in this and urge everyone else to do it on the Swim England website. And let's get women's voices heard above Stonewall or mermaids or all sorts or Jiras or transfigurations and the rest of the trans lobby. In the following weeks, we've been into high street changing rooms and shown how vulnerable we are to voyeurs when you allow men into changing rooms with women and girls. We've written to and met with our MPs and ministers. We've been on television and on the radio talking about the rights of women and girls, though we did turn down the documentary where Munro Bergdorf explained what it is to be a woman that aired last night. We've mansplained, we've manspread, and we've manslammed wherever we go on Fridays. We've used men's loos and... Amy recently turned the men's loos at Parliament into gender-neutral ones. I felt brave. And one member asked for their sex to be changed on their driving licence, which was done with no evidence and no questions, but caused a significant upset on social media, with supporters of self-identification saying we've abused it and broken the law. Which is kind of the point. And this is a movement that anyone can join in with. You can be a man on Friday any way you wish. Please just tweet about it using our hashtag. Of course, we're often asked why we're doing this, both on an individual and on a collective level, and everyone has their own personal motivations. Mine are that I can't fathom why my dysphoric illness was treated with therapy and meal plans, and quite rightly so, whereas gender dysphoria, even in young people, is met with affirmation, medication, and surgery. That, to me, is like giving an anorexic a gastric band, liposuction, some diet pills, whilst calling her fat, and ignoring the complex underlying reasons for her dissatisfaction with her body. Man Friday exists because the rights of women and girls are under a large-scale, wholesale attack from the trans rights movement. It exists because our letters and our conversations are ignored. It exists because women's voices are so routinely dismissed we've had to move on to direct action. Trans rights activism is often called men's rights activism in a frock, and frankly that's what it is. Women are set to lose so much if this push in changing both the law and its application in our day-to-day lives succeeds. Man Friday exists to push back against this, to roll back what is already happening in statute and in practice. As Debbie said earlier, in Scotland we've already seen the word woman being redefined to include anyone with the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. That means that the legal definition of woman includes men. We can't define ourselves as a sex anymore, and if we can't define our sex, how can we define our sex-based protections and our sex-based oppression? And in practice, what we're seeing now is a race for service providers, organisations and companies to be the most progressive, even before the law has been changed. Ladies' changing rooms and lavatories are now de facto unisex spaces, though men's remain exclusive. Women's sports, both professional and amateur, are open to men now. In January last year, we were told, this girl can. Now it's more, well, this girl could, but she should know that she'll be beaten by or hurt by a male, so probably needs to adjust her expectations or maybe just not bother. Women's political shortlists are open to anyone who declares themselves to be a woman. Women's prizes and participation schemes are likewise open to self-identifying women. Even those who only identify as women part-time, whatever that means, are winning prizes and scholarships set up to improve female representation. More important than these spaces, though they are pretty important, are those that are more vulnerable in society access. Women's refuges, where there's consultation to allow self-identified women to work, putting the validation and feelings of men ahead of the safety, privacy and dignity of women and girls. Hospital wards, where we've read about cases such as Philippa Malloy's, where she was reprimanded and called a bigot for being afraid of a male-bodied, self-declared woman on her locked psychiatric ward. A space where she needed to feel safe in order to recover was completely compromised in order to validate the delusions of a man. Prisons are another one. Rapists are moved to the women's estate, where they go on to behave inappropriately towards both female inmates and staff, and assault female inmates. These women can't vote with their feet and use another service provider. They have no agency and no choices, and the authorities choose to put them at risk of great harm to validate men's feelings and fantasies. Most distressing, however, are situations where children are involved. The schools, the clubs, and the extracurricular activities. I'll park the idea of transgender children as it makes me very angry that children are being set on a lifelong medical pathway for not conforming with outdated stereotypes. But the current drive to put the needs of the transgender child ahead of everyone else's and ignore the impact on the girls, and it is mainly girls, around them is obscene. We know that in girl guiding, they've stated that boys can join and other parents shouldn't be told that they're sleeping in dormitories or tents with their daughters. How many teenage girls will need to be assaulted, and recent statistics show tens of thousands of teenagers sexually assaulting girls and women, or become pregnant through experimental lesbian sex, before something is done to stop this madness? In schools, similar things are happening. One woman told me the story of her 11-year-old daughter being faced with an 11-year-old boy who claimed to be trans, masturbating his penis in the girls' changing room. This boy was known to behave in a sexually inappropriate way and was allowed unfettered access to girls' changing rooms by announcing his special trans status. This must not be allowed to happen. In a world where we've only recently had Me Too, we're telling girls and young women that their boundaries can be ignored by men and boys. And to paraphrase Posey Parker, surely all 11-year-old girls have a right to enter a ladies' changing room and not see a penis. All women and girls should have that right. These are the spaces we have to fight to protect. I recently had a post deleted by Mumsnet for saying that anyone who thinks that a woman's spaces should be opened up to men is either an idiot, a pervert, or someone who values their feelings more than the safety, privacy, and dignity of women and girls. And I stand by this, and that's why we have to protest against these changes. Even if you're not a protester, and I've never protested against anything until the 16th of March, you've got to find it in you to fight for our rights. As ever, the pace of change moves faster and faster once movements gain traction. And this is why we must act now. The change in language used is a huge indicator of how entrenched the trans rights movement has become, and it's something we must push back against. We must act to challenge every instant where an idiot says trans women are women, a sentiment that only became mainstream a few months back. We must challenge every time we are called cis. Woman does not need a prefix. We need to remind everyone who says assigned at birth that sex isn't assigned, it's observed. Anyone who utters these words, particularly politicians, is telling you that they will tell you any number of lies, no matter how big or how small, in order to shut you down, and they are telling you that they have no respect for you or for the truth. Their arrogance on this point astounds me, as it tells us so clearly that they have no integrity and they don't care that we know this. We need to protest against the changes in statute and in society, and protest as loud as we can. We cannot let the rights our grandmothers fought for be reduced and removed. And we owe that to our daughters, our nieces, our granddaughters, and our goddaughters. And we owe it to ourselves. When I sat at the Women's Place meeting in February, I didn't think I could do anything. I did, and I'm no more special than any one of you sitting in this room tonight. We can do things together, like attending this meeting, like petitioning Parliament, and if you haven't signed it yet, the link to the petition is on the Man Friday website, like sharing a gender-critical article with our real-life friends on Facebook, or sharing our experience and knowledge on more anonymous platforms like Twitter. And I did originally say Mumsnet here, but I fear that Mumsnet has fallen.
No, it's still, we're pushing back the boundaries. Let's go back and push back those boundaries.
Okay, I'll believe you. We can do things alone, like writing to or meeting with our MPs and ministers, like changing the sex marker on our driving licence and writing about it and provoking the wrath of the trans rights activists. Like taking up space and talking to others about this nonsense, like going for a swim. No act is too small. 2 women went swimming and helped smash No Debate wide open. I certainly didn't expect us to get the coverage and the traction we did, but there's no way I will squander it now. The mainstream press is talking, the public is talking. The people in power might not be listening yet, but some of them are asking to meet with us. The tide is turning, and let's keep the pressure up to ensure it doesn't turn back. I'm not afraid to speak the truth. A woman cannot have a penis. Men do not belong in female spaces, and I support the right of women and girls. My name is Hannah Clarke, but I may as well be any one of you.